Have you ever failed so many times in your life that you genuinely start believing the universe has marked you as a permanent loser? That no matter how much effort you put in, the outcome will always be the same: disappointment. That was my reality for years. My name is Hiro Takahashi, 24 years old, holder of an economics degree from a mid-tier university in Japan. I once dreamed of joining the government, designing smart policies that could fix social issues and boost the economy. I wanted to make my parents proud and build a stable future. Instead, I failed the extremely competitive National Public Service exam 5 painful times. The first failure felt like a temporary setback. The second made me study harder. By the third, doubt crept in. The fourth broke my confidence. The fifth left me emotionally numb. My parents stopped asking about the results. They would just sigh quietly and change the subject. Old friends slowly stopped inviting me to gatherings. I became the family disappointment. Working night shifts at a convenience store, living in a cramped one-room apartment cluttered with old textbooks and piles of rejection letters. On that cold, rainy Tuesday night, my life took the most dramatic turn imaginable. I was walking home after another exhausting shift, completely drenched, clutching the latest rejection letter in my freezing fingers. Rain poured down heavily, streetlights blurred on the wet pavement. Suddenly, bright headlights cut through the darkness. I heard the horrible screech of tires skidding on the slick road. There was a massive impact, then complete darkness swallowed me. I thought that was the end. I expected pain, sirens, or perhaps nothing at all. Instead, I slowly regained consciousness lying on soft, fragrant grass. I opened my eyes to an incredible sight. Massive ancient trees towered high above me, their leaves shimmering with a faint magical glow. Tiny glowing particles drifted peacefully through the air like living stars. The air felt incredibly fresh and pure, carrying scents of flowers, rich earth, and something I couldn't quite name. My smartphone had completely vanished. My wallet and keys were gone. All I had left were my wrinkled white dress shirt with sleeves rolled up, my dark pants, and my muddy black sneakers. I sat up, my heart hammering wildly in my chest. This isn't Japan, this isn't Earth. There was no status screen, no overpowered cheat abilities, no friendly goddess offering blessings. Just me, Hiro Takahashi, 5-time exam failure, alone in a fantasy world with nothing but my half-remembered economics knowledge and stubbornness. For the next several days, I wandered through the forest, surviving on wild berries, drinking from clear streams, and trying to process what had happened. Eventually, I reached the edge of human settlements. That was when I first witnessed the true state of the kingdom of Eldoria. It was dying. Villages I encountered showed deep suffering. Children with hollow cheeks and painfully thin bodies begged along muddy roads. Farmers, faces etched with exhaustion and despair, worked from sunrise to long after sunset but barely produced enough food to feed their own families. The tax collectors were the worst. They behaved like armed bandits, taking grain, livestock, tools, and even clothing from the poorest households. While the common people starved and fell ill from preventable diseases, the nobles lived in luxury behind high stone walls. They hosted extravagant banquets, drank fine imported wines, and wasted resources that could have saved hundreds of lives. The inequality was glaring and painful to witness. At the center of this collapse sat King Ulrich Voss. 3 years earlier, his only son and heir, Prince Leon, had died heroically in a brutal border war against the aggressive neighboring kingdom of Drakmor. The king never recovered. He drowned his grief in alcohol from morning until he passed out at night. Court meetings were cancelled indefinitely. Important reports from across the realm gathered dust. The entire kingdom was slowly rotting, while its ruler drank himself into oblivion. Only one person still fought desperately to save Eldoria, Princess Elara Voss. Villagers spoke her name with a fragile mix of hope and pity. She was trying to manage the kingdom almost single-handedly while her father remained lost in sorrow. I spent my first weeks surviving on odd jobs, listening carefully to conversations in markets and taverns. The economic problems were obvious to me. High taxes on production killed any incentive to grow more. No investment in agriculture or infrastructure. Poor sanitation spread disease rapidly. Corrupt nobles hoarded fertile land and contributed almost nothing to the treasury. This kingdom didn't need a legendary hero with a sword. It needed better systems and incentives. One afternoon, driven by severe hunger, I stole a loaf of bread from a market stall. The guards caught me almost immediately. Guards dragged me roughly through the crowded streets, my arms twisted painfully behind my back. People stared at the filthy stranger who dared to steal bread. My heart raced with fear as we entered the grand royal palace. The halls were beautiful but showed signs of neglect, faded banners, dusty corners, and an overall atmosphere of quiet decline. Finally, they pushed me into the large royal audience chamber and forced me to kneel on the cold stone floor. There she was. Princess Elara Voss sat on a raised platform, 22 years old, radiating both beauty and exhaustion. She had long, flowing silver blonde hair styled in an elegant half-up braid with soft strands gently framing her face. Her piercing emerald green eyes were sharp and intelligent, yet they carried the heavy weight of someone who had been fighting alone for too long. She wore a regal royal blue and white gown adorned with intricate gold embroidery that caught the light from the tall windows. A delicate silver circlet rested on her head, simple but unmistakably royal. She looked down at me, a dirty, ragged otherworlder who smelled of the streets, with cool suspicion, and said in a clear, authoritative voice that echoed through the chamber, "You have exactly 1 minute to explain why I should not throw you into the deepest dungeon for theft, stranger. Speak wisely." My mouth went dry. This was it, my one and only chance at survival in this world. I took a deep breath, gathered every bit of courage I had, and began speaking as clearly and quickly as possible. "Your Highness, please listen. Your kingdom is collapsing not only because of the recent war or bad luck, but due to deeply flawed economic incentives that are destroying productivity from within. Your current tax system severely punishes anyone who tries to produce more than the bare minimum needed for survival. Farmers hide most of their harvests to avoid confiscation by greedy tax collectors. Merchants avoid the main markets because of excessive tolls, bribes, and harassment from corrupt officials. Nobles hoard vast amounts of fertile land but contribute almost nothing to the royal treasury while living in luxury. Diseases spread rapidly through contaminated water sources and the complete lack of basic sanitation. These problems are not inevitable. They are man-made, and they can be fixed with better policies and knowledge from my world." The princess remained completely silent, her emerald eyes locked on me without blinking. I continued without stopping, desperate to use every second of my 1 minute. I knelt lower and used a piece of charcoal from a nearby brazier to draw diagrams directly on the stone floor. I explained the 3-field crop rotation system in detail, how dividing fields into 3 parts and rotating crops like wheat, legumes, and leaving one fallow could restore soil fertility and dramatically increase yields. I described the importance of building public granaries to store surplus food for bad harvest years. I outlined simple sand and charcoal water filtration methods that could reduce disease outbreaks. I proposed a progressive tax reform that would lower rates on productive commoners and hardworking merchants while increasing levies on unused noble lands. Finally, I suggested creating public schools to spread literacy, basic mathematics, and improved agricultural techniques across the kingdom. When I finished, the grand chamber was deathly quiet. The guards shifted uncomfortably. Princess Elara stared at my crude drawings on the floor for a long time. The tension in the air was thick. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. Following days after my audience with Princess Elara were some of the most intense and exhausting of my life. I was given a small but clean room in one of the palace's side wings, along with 2 guards who followed me everywhere. The princess wasted no time. The very next morning, she summoned me to a private meeting room filled with maps, old scrolls, and records of the kingdom's dire finances. "Show me results," she said simply, her emerald eyes watching me carefully. "Start small, 1 village, 1 idea. I will judge by what actually happens, not by clever words." I chose the village of Greenfields, located just a few hours' ride from the capital. It was a typical suffering settlement, poor soil, low yields, and many sick villagers. With a small team of royal soldiers and a reluctant local official, I began implementing the first changes. I taught the farmers the 3-field crop rotation system. Instead of planting the same crop year after year until the soil died, I explained how to divide their fields into 3 parts. 1 part for wheat or barley, 1 part for legumes like beans or peas that naturally restore nitrogen to the soil, and 1 part left fallow to recover. I showed them how to create simple compost using kitchen scraps, animal manure, and dried leaves. We also organized the digging of better irrigation ditches to bring water from a nearby river more efficiently. At the same time, I introduced basic sanitation practices. I convinced the villagers to boil their drinking water and helped them build simple sand and charcoal filters for wells. The changes were small, but I could see the spark of hope in some of the farmers' eyes, even if most remained skeptical of the strange outsider. Weeks passed. I traveled back and forth between the palace and Greenfields constantly. I barely slept. Princess Elara visited the village once herself to inspect the progress. She said little, but I noticed she stayed longer than expected, quietly observing the people working the fields with new energy. The first real test came during the next harvest. The results were undeniable. Greenfields produced nearly 30% more grain than the previous year. Fewer people fell ill from waterborne diseases. Word began to spread to neighboring villages. For the first time in years, people started talking about the Otherworld advisor with cautious optimism rather than suspicion. However, success brought danger. Lord Varak Thorne, one of the most powerful and wealthy nobles in the kingdom, quickly took notice. He was a tall, imposing man of 42 with slick-back, oily black hair streaked with silver, cold gray eyes and a thin, cruel mustache. He always dressed in dark purple and black noble tunics with gold accents. During a court session I attended, he openly mocked my ideas. "This outsider brings dangerous foreign nonsense," he declared loudly. "He will fill the people's heads with foolish dreams and weaken the natural order. The nobles know best how to manage the land." His words were met with murmurs of agreement from several other nobles who benefited from the old corrupt system. I could feel the hostility directed at me. Princess Elara defended me calmly but firmly. stating that results mattered more than tradition. Yet I knew Varak was not someone who would accept defeat easily. Later, I learned from palace servants that he had begun spreading rumors that I was a spy sent by Drakmor. Despite the growing opposition, I continued working closely with the princess. In the evenings, we would meet in the royal study. She asked detailed questions about my world, about economics, history, and how societies developed. I asked her about Eldoria's past, its culture, and the weight she carried as the only responsible royal left. Our conversations grew longer and more personal. I found myself admiring not just her beauty, but her intelligence, determination, and genuine care for her people. Slowly, I realized I was falling for her. But every night I reminded myself of reality. I was a failed exam taker from another world. Dreaming of a princess was foolish. Still, working side by side with her made the long hours feel worthwhile. By the end of the third month, 3 more villages had adopted the new farming methods with similar success. Tax revenue from those areas actually increased even though rates were lowered, because people were producing and trading more. Princess Elara began trusting me more openly. She even defended me strongly when Lord Varak tried to have me removed from the palace. But I knew the real test was still coming. The king himself had not yet fully supported the changes, and Varak's shadow was growing darker with every passing week. One cold evening, after a long day of reviewing tax records and planning the next wave of reforms, Princess Elara came to my quarters. Her expression was serious, a mix of determination and worry. "Tonight," she said quietly, "you will meet my father, the king. It is time he hears about your work directly from you. Be honest, be respectful, but do not hold back the truth." My stomach tightened with anxiety. I had heard many stories about King Aldrich Voss. Once a legendary warrior who led armies to victory, he was now a broken man lost in grief and wine. I quickly changed into the cleaner set of clothes the palace had provided me and followed the princess through the dimly lit corridors toward the throne room. The throne room was vast but felt empty and melancholic. Many torches remained unlit. Dust covered parts of the ornate tapestries. At the far end sat King Aldrich Voss on his grand throne. He was 55 years old but looked much older. His long graying black hair was unkempt and wild. Deep scars from old battles marked his face. His once mighty royal robes were stained with wine and wrinkled. In his hand he held a golden goblet, his fingers trembling slightly. His eyes were bloodshot and distant. Princess Elara stepped forward first. "Father, this is Hiro Takahashi, the Otherworlder I told you about. He has brought new ideas that are already helping some villages. Please listen to him." The king slowly lifted his gaze. His voice was rough and slurred from drink. "So, you are the boy from another world who thinks he can fix what war and fate have broken. Tell me, stranger, why should I listen to you when my own advisors and nobles have failed me for years?" I swallowed hard, stepped forward, and bowed deeply before speaking. "Your Majesty, I am not a hero or a great warrior. I am simply someone who understands systems and incentives. Your kingdom is suffering because the current systems punish hard work and reward corruption. Farmers hide their crops because taxes take too much. Merchants avoid trading due to fear and bribes. Nobles hoard land without contributing. Disease spreads because of dirty water. These issues are not caused by the war alone. They existed before and have grown worse because there has been no strong leadership to fix them." The king's eyes narrowed. He took another sip from his goblet. "You speak boldly for someone who knows nothing of our pain. My son Leon died fighting Drakmor. Everything feels pointless without him." I met his gaze steadily and continued with respect but firmness. "I cannot bring your son back, Your Majesty, but I know he fought and died for Eldoria. Would he want to see the kingdom he loved slowly die while you remain trapped in grief? The people are still loyal to you. They want to believe in their king again. Give me 6 months to fully implement these reforms. Lower taxes on production, build public schools, improve farming and sanitation. If I fail, you can execute me publicly as a fraud. But if I succeed, you may see Eldoria rise again, stronger and more prosperous than before. Your son's sacrifice would then have meaning." A heavy silence filled the throne room. Princess Elara stood tense beside me. The king stared at me for a long time, his bloodshot eyes showing a flicker of something, perhaps anger, perhaps hope. Then, with a visibly shaking hand, he slowly placed his wine goblet on the small table beside the throne. It was the first time I had seen him set the drink down. He spoke in a low, rough voice. 6 months. If you fail, your head will decorate the palace gates. If you succeed, we shall see." Princess Elara's shoulders relaxed slightly. As we left the throne room, she whispered to me, "That was more than I expected from him in a long time. You reached him, Hiro, thank you." That night, as I lay in bed, I felt both relieved and terrified. I now had the king's reluctant approval, but the pressure had just increased dramatically. Lord Varak and the corrupt nobles would not stay quiet. The real challenges were only beginning. Yet for the first time since arriving in this world, I felt truly hopeful. I had a purpose. I had the princess's trust. And now, even the broken king had given me a chance to prove myself. With the king's reluctant approval, the pace of change accelerated dramatically across Eldoria. Princess Elara gave me more authority to implement the reforms, and I threw myself into the work with everything I had. We started with 5 key villages and slowly expanded outward. 3-field crop rotation system became the foundation of our agricultural revolution. Farmers who had struggled for years with depleted soil now divided their lands into 3 sections. One field grew wheat or barley, another grew nitrogen-fixing legumes like beans and peas, and the third was left fallow to recover. I taught them how to create proper compost heaps using kitchen waste, animal manure, and crop residues. We organized communal efforts to dig improved irrigation canals that brought steady water even during drier months. At the same time, we launched the kingdom's first public schools in the capital and surrounding areas. Children who once worked in fields all day now attended classes for a few hours each day. They learned reading, writing, basic mathematics, and practical farming techniques. Many parents were hesitant at first, but when they saw their children excited to learn and bringing new ideas home, resistance faded. We also introduced progressive tax reforms. Taxes on productive farmers and merchants were lowered significantly, while idle noble lands faced higher levies. The idea was simple: reward productivity, punish hoarding. Public granaries were constructed in major towns to store surplus grain for emergencies. Basic sanitation rules were enforced: boiling water, proper waste disposal, and the use of simple filters. The results started appearing faster than even I had dared to hope. Within 4 months, harvest yields in the reformed villages increased by 25 to 40%. Cases of waterborne diseases dropped sharply. Markets became busier as merchants felt safer traveling again. For the first time in years, tax revenue to the crown actually rose despite the lower rates on commoners, because overall economic activity had surged. Villages that once looked half dead now had repaired roofs, healthier children running to school, and small shops opening along the main roads. Princess Elara and I worked side by side almost every day. In the evenings, we would retreat to the royal study, surrounded by candlelight and stacks of scrolls. We discussed policy details late into the night. She was incredibly sharp. She challenged every idea, asked difficult questions, and offered insights that improved my proposals. One night, after reviewing the latest harvest reports, she looked at me with soft emerald eyes and said, "When you first stood in the audience chamber, I thought you were either mad or lying. Now, I find myself believing in a future I had almost given up on. Tell me more about your world, Hiro. What was it like to study economics there?" I told her about modern Japan, about concepts like supply and demand incentives, and how societies could grow through innovation and education. She listened with genuine fascination. As the weeks passed, our conversations became more personal. She spoke about the pressure of being the only responsible royal left, about missing her brother, and about her fears for Eldoria's future. I found myself sharing my own failures, the 5 exam attempts, the disappointment, the sense of being lost. Slowly but surely, I was falling deeply in love with her. Her strength, her kindness, her intelligence, everything about her drew me in. I tried to push those feelings down, reminding myself of the massive gap between us, but working so closely together made it impossible to ignore. Not everyone was happy with the progress. Lord Varak Thorne grew more aggressive in his opposition. During noble assemblies, he openly criticized the reforms, claiming they would weaken tradition and empower the rabble. He began spreading rumors that I was a foreign spy and that the princess was being manipulated. Several attempts were made on my life: a poisoned meal that my guards caught, and an ambush in a back alley that I barely escaped. Despite the dangers, the momentum was building. The common people started calling me the Otherworld advisor with respect. King Aldrich even began attending some meetings sober, showing small signs of his old self returning. Princess Elara's hope grew stronger every day, and so did the bond between us. But I knew the biggest confrontation was still coming. Lord Varak would not allow his power to slip away without a fight. As the reforms continued to spread and show results, a dark shadow grew over the palace. Lord Varak Thorne was no longer content with mere complaints in the noble assemblies. He became more dangerous with every passing week. At first, his attacks were subtle. He spread rumors throughout the capital that I was a spy sent by Drakmor to weaken Eldoria from within. He claimed the princess was being manipulated by foreign sorcery, and that the new farming methods would poison the land. He bribed minor officials to slow down the implementation of new policies and encouraged some nobles to resist paying the revised taxes. Then the attacks became more direct. One evening, while I was returning from inspecting a new school, I was ambushed in a narrow alley near the palace walls. 3 masked men attacked me with knives. I was saved only because my royal guards reacted quickly. The attackers were captured, but they refused to talk. Everyone knew they were likely hired by Varak, but we had no solid proof. Another attempt came through poison. A servant who had been bribed slipped something into my meal. Thankfully, one of the princess's loyal maids noticed the strange smell and stopped me from eating it. The incidents made me more cautious, but they also strengthened my resolve. Princess Elara was furious when she learned about the attempts on my life. We met late one night in her private study. The candle light flickered across her face as she gripped the edge of the table. "I will not let him destroy everything we've built," she said, her emerald eyes burning with anger. "Varak has grown too powerful. He controls too many nobles and has connections I fear reach all the way to Drakmor." I nodded. "We need evidence, not just rumors. If we can prove he is working with the enemy, even the other nobles will turn against him." From that point on, we began gathering information quietly. I worked with a few trusted officials and some of the princess's personal spies to track Varak's movements and communications. What we discovered was alarming. Messengers were slipping in and out of his estate at night. Large sums of money were moving through hidden accounts. There were coded letters suggesting he had promised Drakmor that he would deliver the kingdom if they supported his coup. Meanwhile, the reforms kept showing success. More villages adopted the new systems. School attendance grew. Markets became lively again. King Aldrich even started appearing in court more often, looking cleaner and more alert. The people's mood was slowly shifting from despair to cautious hope. But Varak's influence still loomed large. During a grand noble council meeting, he stood up and made a bold speech against us. "This Otherworlder and his radical ideas are tearing apart the natural order," he declared loudly, his cold eyes fixed on me. "The princess has been deceived. Lower taxes on commoners, public schools for peasants, these changes will only lead to chaos and rebellion. The nobles know what is best for this kingdom." Some nobles cheered in agreement while others looked uncertain. Princess Elara defended the reforms passionately, citing the improved harvest numbers and reduced disease. The king watched silently, but I could see he was listening. That night, as Elara and I reviewed documents in the study, she placed her hand over mine for a moment. Her touch was warm and comforting. "I'm sorry you've been dragged into this danger, Hiro," she whispered. "But I'm also grateful you're here. I don't think I could have kept fighting alone much longer." My heart raced at her words and touch. In that quiet moment, the gap between a failed exam taker and a princess felt a little smaller. But I knew we were approaching a breaking point. Varak would not wait forever. He was preparing something big, a final move to seize power. The storm was coming. The tension in the capital had become almost unbearable. Everyone could feel that something major was about to happen. Lord Varak Thorne had grown bolder. His spies were everywhere, and the number of nobles openly supporting him increased week by week. Princess Elara and I worked frantically to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. It finally came during the Grand Noble Assembly, a major gathering held in the magnificent Great Hall of the palace. Nobles from across Eldoria had been summoned. King Aldrich sat on his throne, looking more present than he had in years. Princess Elara stood at his right side. I stood slightly behind her, my heart pounding as I clutched the folder containing all the evidence we had gathered. The hall was filled with the murmur of voices until Lord Varak Thorne stepped forward dramatically, his dark purple robes sweeping the floor. His cold gray eyes burned with ambition as he raised his voice. "Your Majesty, this kingdom is being led into ruin by a foreign manipulator and a weak princess. The reforms are nothing but poison. I declare that King Aldrich is no longer fit to rule due to his grief and poor judgment. I, Lord Varak Thorne, with the support of many loyal nobles and the backing of the Kingdom of Drakmor, hereby claim the throne for the good of Eldoria." Chaos erupted instantly. Shouts filled the hall. Armed mercenaries loyal to Varak stormed in through the side entrances, weapons drawn, swords were drawn. Several loyal guards were cut down in the initial surprise attack. Panic spread through the crowd of nobles. In the middle of the madness, I stepped forward with all the courage I could muster. My voice rang out across the hall, amplified by the acoustics. "Lord Varak Thorne, you are a traitor." The room quieted slightly as all eyes turned to me. I held up the bundle of documents. "You accuse others of betrayal while you secretly sell this kingdom to Drakmor. We have proof, coded letters, financial records showing massive payments from the enemy and sworn statements from messengers you thought were loyal to you. You promised them our land and our people in exchange for the crown. You care nothing for Eldoria, you only want power." I passed the documents to the royal herald, who began reading key excerpts aloud. Gasps and angry murmurs spread through the nobles as the evidence mounted. Varak's face twisted with rage. "Lies," he roared, "seize them." A fierce battle broke out in the great hall. Swords clashed against steel. Loyal royal guards fought desperately against Varak's mercenaries. Magic spells from court mages flashed in bursts of light and fire. I stayed close to Princess Elara, protecting her as best as I could while guards formed a defensive circle around us and the king. King Aldrich rose from his throne, his old warrior spirit finally reawakening. With a thunderous voice I had never heard from him before, he shouted, "Guards, arrest the traitor Varak Thorne and all who stand with him, for Eldoria." The tide turned. The loyal forces, inspired by the king's command and the revealed evidence, fought with renewed fury. Varak's mercenaries were gradually overpowered. Varak himself tried to flee but was cornered and captured alive by royal knights. As the fighting died down, the hall fell into a heavy silence broken only by the groans of the wounded. Princess Elara stood tall beside her father, her emerald eyes fierce with victory and relief. She looked at me and gave a small, grateful smile that made my heart skip. King Aldrich stepped forward, his presence commanding once more. Lord Varak Thorne, you are hereby stripped of all titles and lands. Your treason against the crown and the people of Eldoria will be punished to the full extent of the law. The coup had failed, but the cost had been high, lives lost, the hall damaged, and trust among the nobility fractured. Yet in that moment, something important had shifted. The king was back, the traitor was exposed, and the path was finally clear for real, lasting change. In the weeks following the failed coup, Eldoria began to heal. Lord Varak Thorne was imprisoned and later executed for high treason after a fair trial. His lands were seized by the crown and redistributed to loyal nobles and productive farmers. Many of his supporters, seeing which way the wind was blowing, quickly pledged renewed loyalty to the king. The threat from Drakmor was neutralized for the time being, as they lost their inside ally. King Aldrich Voss underwent the most remarkable transformation. The man who had spent years lost in grief and wine slowly returned to his former self. He attended court regularly, listened to reports, and even began making decisive rulings again. He started calling me my boy in private meetings, which embarrassed me greatly, but also filled me with unexpected warmth. One afternoon, he placed a heavy hand on my shoulder and said, "You gave me back my purpose, Hiro. I will not waste this second chance." Reforms that had already taken root now flourished without the constant sabotage from Varak's faction. We expanded the 3-field crop rotation system and public schools to more provinces. New irrigation projects brought water to previously dry lands. Trade routes became safe and busy once more. Merchants from neighboring friendly realms began arriving in greater numbers, bringing wealth and new opportunities. Results were visible everywhere. Fields that once yielded poor harvests now overflowed with grain. Villages buzzed with life, children laughing on their way to school, artisans opening workshops, and markets filled with fresh produce and goods. Disease rates continued to drop thanks to better sanitation and clean water. Tax revenue stabilized at healthy levels, while the common people enjoyed more prosperity than they had seen in a generation. One beautiful evening, as the sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Princess Elara invited me to the highest balcony of the royal castle. The capital city stretched out below us, alive with lights and activity. Blooming flowers lined the balcony railing, filling the air with sweet fragrance. We stood side by side in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sunset. Then she spoke softly. "You really did it, Hiro. When you first appeared before me covered in dirt and desperation, I never imagined this outcome. You saved my father, you saved my people, you saved me from carrying this burden alone." I turned to look at her. The golden light made her silver blonde hair glow and her emerald eyes shine with emotion. My heart felt full. "I didn't do it alone," I replied. "You believed in me when almost no one else did. You gave me the chance, protected me, and worked harder than anyone. We saved Eldoria together, Elara." She smiled, a genuine, warm smile that made my chest tighten. She reached out and gently took my hand. Her fingers intertwined with mine naturally as if they belonged there. "In your world, would a princess and a man from another realm ever have a future?" she asked quietly, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. I squeezed her hand. "In my world, I was a failure who couldn't even pass an exam. Here, I've helped rebuild a kingdom. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that second chances can change everything. And if you'll have me, I'd like to stay by your side, not just as an advisor." Elara leaned her head against my shoulder. "Then stay, Hiro, not as my advisor, but as someone much closer." That moment on the balcony, overlooking a thriving kingdom bathed in sunset light, felt like the true beginning of my new life. From a 5-time exam failure hit by a truck in modern Japan, to standing beside a princess who had captured my heart while helping rebuild an entire realm. The golden age of Eldoria had truly begun. From that evening on the balcony, everything felt different. The kingdom continued to prosper under the renewed leadership of King Aldrich and the dedicated efforts of Princess Elara. I remained by their side, no longer just an outsider offering strange ideas, but a trusted advisor and someone who had become part of the royal family's inner circle. The golden age of Eldoria was not just a phrase, it was reality. Fields stretched across the countryside in lush, abundant waves of gold and green. Public schools multiplied, educating a new generation of children who would grow up with knowledge and hope. Merchants traveled safely along well-maintained roads, bringing goods and wealth from distant lands. Clean water projects and improved sanitation had nearly eliminated the old plagues that once haunted the villages. The royal treasury was stable, the nobles were kept in check, and the common people finally had reasons to smile again. I often walked through the capital streets and heard whispers, "The Otherworld advisor saved us. Some even called me a hero. It felt surreal. Back in Japan, I couldn't pass a simple exam. Here, using basic economic principles and modern knowledge, I had helped rebuild an entire kingdom. King Aldrich fully recovered. He resumed his duties with wisdom earned through suffering. He treated me like a son, often inviting me for private conversations about governance, strategy, and even sharing stories of his youth and his late son Leon. "You've given this old man a reason to keep living," he told me once. As for Princess Elara and me, our relationship blossomed quietly but beautifully. We spent more time together outside of work, walking in the palace gardens, discussing books, and simply enjoying each other's company. She taught me about Eldoria's history, culture, and magic. I told her stories of Earth, cars, airplanes, smartphones, and the complex economies of the modern world. Our bond grew deeper with every passing day. One quiet afternoon in the royal garden, surrounded by blooming flowers, she turned to me and said, "Hiro, you came from another world and changed everything. But more importantly, you changed me. I was so close to giving up before you arrived. Thank you for staying." I took her hands in mine. "I never want to leave. This is my home now. You are my home." She smiled and kissed me softly under the warm sun. In that moment, all my past failures felt worth it. They had led me here. Looking back, I often reflect on how a simple truck accident on a rainy night became the best thing that ever happened to me. I went from being a 5-time exam failure, lost and depressed in modern Japan, to helping save a kingdom and finding love with an incredible princess. Life truly works in mysterious ways. This is my new life, my second chance. And I intend to cherish every single day of it, working to make Eldoria even stronger, standing beside the woman I love, and continuing to apply the lessons of economics, incentives, and human nature I learned the hard way. Closing music swells, hopeful and triumphant. And that's my story, at least so far. If you enjoyed this isekai tale of economics, kingdom building, political intrigue, and second chances, please hit that like button, subscribe for more stories like this, and tell me in the comments, what modern knowledge or skill would you bring if you were suddenly transported to a fantasy world? Until the next chapter, keep failing forward. Your own truck-sized opportunity might be closer than you think.